For some reason, there is a consistent problem with Japanese video game remakes replacing the entire voice cast, but only in the English version. Before I get into it, I need to say up front that the replacement actors are not to blame, nor do I think any of them are bad. Some are actually really good in their roles, and some may even be better than the originals. But they didn't make the decision to replace the old casts. Do not blame them. Blame the companies. Some fans think harassing the new actors is okay, and they are wrong. Stop and think rationally before you send hate towards someone who very obviously is not to blame. Now, the first case of this trend I recall was the Resident Evil 2 remake. Technically the first remake did it too, but none of the characters had consistent voices at the time. By the time of 2 remake, they did. Now, given that 2 Make came 2 decades after the original, by which time everyone had been recast in later installments, those actors not being brought back was a foregone conclusion. But they didn't even bring back the newer voices like Matt Mercer, Courtney Taylor, or James Baker. The only reprisals here were Keith Silverstein as Hunk, and ironically, TJ Rotolo as William Birkin, both of whom had played the characters consistently since the Umbrella Chronicles. Karen Strassman was also cast as Annette Birkin after having played Alexia Ashford and a couple of minor roles. But in Japan, Leon, Claire, Ada, Birkin, and Hunk all retained their previous Japanese voices. Only Sherry was recast. From here, the only reprisals in the remake series in English would be actors from the remake games returning, except Ada, who got recast again for 4. But in Japan, Jill, Carlos, Nikolai, and Wesker retained their pre-remake voices. It's all consistent over there. So what's the deal? We'll discuss some of the common excuses fans come up with later, since I don't think any of these companies ever gave an official reason why. Sticking with Capcom for now, Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster also replaced its entire cast. Despite the script being mostly unchanged, the voice work was redone. The radio calls are now voiced, so if the old actor wasn't available, they would need to be replaced. But that's only a small portion of the cast, since most of the radio talk comes from Otis, who never had a voice before. There's also the updated facial animation, which I believe is the primary reason for the redone voice work, as it's likely easier to have new performances with facial capture than having someone try to mime the old ones. Fair enough. But could they really not bring back anyone? TJ Rotolo reprised Birkin just 5 years prior, and while Dead Rising 4 had recast Frank, MVC Infinite brought Rotolo back the next year. Maybe they felt Dead Rising 1 Frank should have his one voice, similar to Roger Craig Smith reprising Resi 5 Chris in that game, but not either of his 2 Resi appearances that same year. But this is Dead Rising 1 itself, so where the hell is Rotolo? TJ Storm was in Capcom's Monster Hunter Wilds this year, but wasn't brought back as Brad. And are you really going to tell me Steve Bloom was too busy? The next big example is the Final Fantasy VII Remake series. Despite most major characters having gained voice actors over the course of the compilation of FF7 series, not one was brought back to reprise their roles. The Japanese cast is completely consistent, with the only exceptions being Red 13, who had I think 1 line before this, and who needs a versatile actor to pull off, Hojo, since Nachi Nozawa had passed away, and Barrett being recast for Rebirth after Masahiro Kobayashi reprised in Remake and then retired. So those are all entirely reasonable recasts. The English side just doesn't have that. Some of them are even in the remake series, like Crispin Freeman in some minor roles when he used to play Rude. Then we have the series that prompted this entire video, Persona. Persona 3 Reload replaced the entire English voice cast with 3 exceptions: Tanaka, Elizabeth, and Igor. Tanaka is still Patrick Seitz, who's played him since P4 Dancing All Night. Igor is still Kirk Thornton from Persona 5 after the character had been recast multiple times in the preceding games. And Tara Platt has consistently voiced Elizabeth since the original P3. But Platt was not brought back to reprise Mitsuru, one of the main characters. Similarly, most of the original core cast were brought back in minor roles, but not their original characters, some replacing each other in those minor roles. Yuri Lowenthal replaced Liam O'Brien as Eiichiro Takeba, then O'Brien replaced Grant George as Officer Kurosawa, while George replaced Derek Stephen Prince as Mitsuru's father. The only replacements on the Japanese end are the S-Link characters and Igor, as Isamu Tanonaka passed away in 2010 and they'd been reusing voice lines from P3 and 4 in every appearance since, so it was time for a change, even though they could easily have kept it going one last time for the remake of his first time playing the character. Persona 4's remake was leaked by Yuri Lowenthal tweeting that he wanted to reprise Yosuke rather a lot, but was rejected. Erin Fitzgerald then confirmed that she has been replaced as Chie, having played her since 2012. And then Amanda Wynn Lee confirmed that she had been replaced as Yukiko after having played her consistently since 2008. And yes, something similar does happen for Western game remakes too, such as Dead Space. There are only 2 reprisals, but the cast is small anyway, and they kept the most important ones, Isaac Clarke and Nicole Brennan. They even changed Isaac's face to resemble his actor, which I feel shows respect for him, even if you disagree with the decision. Strangely, the company doing best by its original cast is, of all fucking companies, Konami. Yes, they replaced the voice cast from Silent Hill 2 for its remake, but there had been so many issues between Konami and the original cast over the years that they likely wouldn't have wanted to come back at this point. Add on that the writing and tone take the characters in a slightly different direction, and that some of those actors simply don't do voice acting anymore, it's really not surprising. But for Metal Gear Solid Delta, not only are they keeping the original performances from MGS3, they're also redoing the lip sync to match the English dub, and are bringing back several of the voice actors for tutorials and the like. They're even having David Hayter, once callously replaced himself in MGS5, host a series of videos that feature his co-stars such as Laurie Allen and Jodie Benson. Both casts are being retained, with the sole exception, to my knowledge, being Japanese Roy Campbell, who will need a new actor for Snake vs. Bomberman as Takeshi Aono passed away in 2012. Of course, the series record isn't exactly spotless. MGS1's remake, The Twin Snakes, only had the English dub with no Japanese voice option even in Japan. It was famously going to replace everyone but David Hayter, only for him to give up half his paycheck to keep the old cast around. The only recast there was Gray Fox, but Greg Eagles was still brought back to reprise the DARPA chief. I don't know why this decision was made, but at least everyone was brought back. Now for the common excuses that fans have to come up with because the companies are too cowardly to justify their bad decisions themselves. First, the old cast have gotten older and their voices don't fit the characters anymore. I think this one became popular because of X-Men 97. First off, the Japanese cast have been around for just as long, or longer in some cases, but no one demands those guys then be replaced as well. And I'm fairly sure it's all an assumption because anyone who thinks 2025 Yuri Lowenthal couldn't still pull off Yosuke's voice is delusional. Second, these are alternate versions of the characters, so it's fine. Actually, these are rarely new versions. Even with the FF7 story being some weird time travel plot as far as we can tell, they're still the same versions just from a different time. Also, Crisis Core takes place before the timeline split and it replaced everyone, so... The Resident Evil remakes do seem to be set in a separate timeline from the main series, unlike the original remake, which replaced the original. But again, why isn't the Japanese cast different then? And why did Death Island mix the classic and remake casts? If a game series has not rebooted in between, then a remake of an older game tends to replace the original. Third, certain actors aren't returning, so it would be weird to only keep certain ones. I think this is mainly surrounding Vic Mignogna not returning for Persona 3 after the whole Kick Vic thing, but one or two cast members do get replaced all the time. By this logic, everyone should have been replaced in the arena games when they recast Ken and Fuka, or Persona 4 every time one of the actors didn't return, which was, what, 4 times? It's not this huge uncanny thing people make it out to be when an actor or two gets replaced, but when everyone does, and the originals had played them consistently for over a decade, that is surreal and weird. And this argument is also not used to suggest Tara Platt should have been replaced as Elizabeth, nor will it for whomever Persona 4 keeps in a major role. My money's on Johnny Young Bosch as Adachi, and it doesn't apply to Resident Evil as Birkin and Honk were the same in 2, and Death Island has Jill and Claire's remake voices but Matt Mercer reprises Leon from pre-remake. Fourth, it's good for new actors to get a chance in an iconic role. I do agree with this sentiment on paper. In fact, I've said it myself about Transformers, and I'm glad so many actors get a shot at roles like Spider-Man, Batman, and the TMNT. But this isn't the same. Those are brand new versions of the characters. Again, game remakes tend to replace the old one in continuity and be the one referenced in later materials. Persona 3 Reload characters are showing up in Persona X, Yakuza Kiwami's new content is referenced and continued in later games, and the Umbrella Chronicles included Lisa Trevor from the first Resi remake in a new canon scenario. So this one doesn't hold up either. Now, I'm not here to hate on the fans. We're all equally in the dark about the rationale, and some people try to find a way to make it make sense. It's not their fault that the only explanations we can come up with just don't hold water. As a matter of fact, I don't have an explanation I'm committed to. It's just a baffling trend that I fucking despise. The only explanation that makes sense to me is money, and even then, only really for Persona. With actors like Yuri Lowenthal, Johnny Young Bosch, Matt Mercer, Laura Bailey, some of the biggest, most established actors in the industry, you have to imagine they'd cost a lot more than an Alex Lee, an Allegra Clark, or a Zeno Robinson, as fantastic as these newer actors are. So the only way this makes sense to me is that the older cast are too expensive, so the companies will just get rid of them. While in Japan, consistent voice actors are a much more common thing, as voice actors over there are respected a hell of a lot more than they are over here. That's how they can have a consistent main cast for over 20 years, while in English, half the time, you can't even go 5 without replacing somebody. It's a frustrating, consistent trend, and I wish the companies that made these horrendous decisions wouldn't be so disrespectful to the actors who helped make these franchises what they are, and are a not small part of why these games might be worth revisiting in the fucking first place. Imagine getting outdone by Funimation, who opted not to replace the old English cast of Fruits Basket when the Japanese cast was completely changed for its remake, even with all the extra effort they had to go to keep Laura Bailey in it. Ridiculous. If you liked this video, why not subscribe and support me on Patreon like these fine people here? If not, then make sure to share it with your enemies so they can suffer along with you. Today's recommended video is Why Do Voice Actors Get Recast by the Cartoon Cypher. I've recommended it before and the video is 4 years old, but is still relevant.